bum, 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum, 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 bum. So in the last 5 years, how many people close to me have passed away? We had one, two, three. This will be the seventh death of relatively young people, actually, around me that have passed away in the last 5 years. So this one wasn't so close to me, but I have a favorite department store, and yesterday when I went there, there was a memorial for one of the cashiers there that I kind of knew who had passed away over the weekend. I hope it wasn't heat related because I did get to know her a little bit, and I talked to her about how I used to live in my car when I was in Seattle, and she admitted to doing that on and off from time to time. Well, I hope that wasn't what did her in, but who knows? She seemed relatively healthy, other than the discussion we had about that. But that will be 7 deaths in just 5 years. I want to talk about some of the experiences I've had. I feel old every time one of these events happen, but at the same time, every time it happens, it makes me less afraid of my own demise one day because I remember years ago when I was terrified about graduating from school. I was terrified about getting my driver's license. I was terrified about there was a time in my life when I had a big fear of flying, and I went almost a decade without flying. I might break that record this time around because ever since COVID, it seems like I want to do everything remotely now, including going to the computer game conference, including long distance relationships. Oh, we don't need to see each other, right? And then I flew again. And I think part of the reason I got the courage to fly again was because during the time that I didn't fly, we had advances in social media, obviously. I got to see all my friends take all these trips. And that made it seem more comforting to do, right? I had a big fear of graduating from school. I saw a lot of my friends graduate and do well. And so it just softened the fear a little bit that other people have made that journey. And so I suspect watching people near me pass away, especially at a young age, right? I mean, my grandpa passed away 12 years ago now, but he was 90, 95 years old or so. And so I didn't relate to that nearly as much. In fact, it was more of a relief for him that he passed away. I mean, he had some health problems, obviously. The other deaths, I can't say the same thing about. So I had a friend that I had known since first grade. And when we were in eighth grade, he and I used to love to tease each other. I was really good at math, and I always wanted to show him calculator tricks. And I would ask to borrow his calculator. And one time I had borrowed it and accidentally scratched it or left a fingerprint on it, and he was upset. And I was in eighth grade. I was immature. So I decided to make an even bigger scratch on his calculator. At the same time, I was learning about chemistry, and I told him one way to test the hardness of a material is to see how big of a scratch you can make with. I picked up a rock that I found in our driveway, and I said, "Well, your calculator is softer than the rock in our driveway." And then we started scratching everything we could think of around the classroom. He was so upset at first, but then he learned something new, and it was like, "Here, can you scratch this?" He started bringing other stuff in from home and asking me to scratch it. And this went on for a few more weeks. And then one day, after I had scratched up his calculator in all directions, I decided to scratch the display panel as well. And then he got even more upset. He refused to ever lend me the calculator again. And unfortunately, he had a drug problem. And so it all started when I didn't realize he had he was a smoker. One day we were at his graduation party, and he says, "Guess what? I quit." And I thought he had a porn problem because he and I used to discuss about that. But then he exclaimed that for his graduation he was quitting smoking, and I was very surprised that he ever smoked. And I asked him what happened, and he said that he had been reading a lot of materials about smoking, and he wondered why, despite decades and decades of warnings about smoking, people would still do it anyway. So he had to try a few to see what it was like. And the rest is history, I guess. And I said, well, I guess you now know why people do it then, right? So don't do it. And unfortunately, he struggled on and off with the smoking and eventually progressed to painkillers, unfortunately. And he passed away almost 5 years ago now. His death was a big wake-up call to me because I have an addictive personality myself. And many years ago, I used to get into a lot of car accidents. And part of the reason he started using the painkillers was because he got into a car accident. So his death was a wake-up call that I need to be a better driver. So it reinforced the idea that one slip-up could really end your life. And also, not only for myself, but I don't want to be responsible for hurting somebody else and then they using painkillers and dying, right? Imagine I hear on the news today that somebody that I heard in a car accident 5 years ago just passed away. They passed away because of a painkiller overdose. I think that I would be really hurt by that. I'd probably want to kill myself if that were the case. And so his death became a big wake-up call to me. And so at the time, I've never used painkillers, obviously. I smoke an occasional Cuban cigars, but I wouldn't say those are addictive. But at the time, I was grappling with binge eating problems. To give you an idea of how bad a binge eater I was, I would get ready to go to work or go to a job interview, go to a date or something like that, or maybe you get the idea. And I would think about something I could get along the way, right? Maybe on the way to work, there's a convenience store, grocery store, I can pick up whatever. I would go there and they would be sold out for whatever reason, right? Maybe on the way there a pandemic broke out and they sold out as a result. And that would be a huge mess. I would get lost. I would look for another store, or I would go to work and be in a complete mess. And I can't tell you how many times that has happened. It's probably contributed to me losing a number of jobs. It's contributed to a number of dates going sideways. It's probably contributed to car accidents. You get the idea. And I wasn't eating a lot. That's the problem. See, people think binge eater. They think about somebody going to a hot dog contest and eating 200 hot dogs. I couldn't do that if you asked me to. The problem I ran into was I had a hard time changing my mind after I had fixated on a certain food. It was like my body had tuned to that station and I couldn't get out of it. It's weird. If anybody has had binge eating problems and can describe it, please leave a comment. I cannot put into words the feeling, except I'll know it when I feel it. I still grapple with that problem from time to time, not daily like I used to, but every so often I get fixated, not necessarily on food, but on an event, on let's say I move around a lot, right? I'm in a different apartment now. Imagine I start booking at the next apartment that I'm going to be in 2 months from now, right? You get a better deal if you shop around, right? Somebody's breaking a lease or something like that. Okay, 2 months later, I'm just about to make that drive to that home when maybe they had to lock the home because whoever was there just recovered from COVID. There's a home repair emergency. All of a sudden, I have a hard time quickly reshuffling my plan, right? That's the problem that I run into a lot. I need to fix that problem in my life because sooner or later, something's going to happen where I need to quickly readjust and have a difficult time with that, right? The COVID lockdowns, the reopenings, protests, stores closing early because of quiet quitting. Those things have a tendency to throw me. Once I know they're in place, like imagine I have a favorite restaurant. And now instead of opening till 10, they're going to open till 7 because people are quiet quitting. And I know it oh, I could adjust to that, right? It's the day that they switch it that I tended to run into big trouble, right? And so you get the idea. But after my friend passed away, I worried that I would have difficulty if I got into a car accident or used painkillers. I almost thought about writing some kind of medical directive that if I get into some sort of pain issue to not give me painkillers. I have an addictive personality, something like that. Um, but see, I had a really turbulent year that year. My friend passed away from drug overdose. I had an ex-girlfriend who was going through menopause. I don't know why she decided she could talk to me about it, but we're still close friends. See, even my mom didn't talk to me about what she was going through, but my ex-girlfriend decided she was okay with talking to me about it, and that saddened me because again, it made me feel old. It made me feel like there are things in my life that I got to do now before my body turns on me, and so I got lost. And then my then girlfriend, we were thinking about a long-term commitment at that time, and there were so many things that I wanted to do as a single guy that I hadn't done yet. At the time, I called it my single life grand finale because we had just had Cassini grand finale. And so I had a very lost year in 2019. See, when people say how bad 2020 was, I instinctively think 2020, at least I didn't have all that drama. It was 2019 that was my lost year. So I had a very lost year. I was growing old. My friends were dying, going through menopause, and even myself, I had to get married soon, and I was lost. And then one day I turned on the news and discovered that I can't even go see my girlfriend anymore because we have to stay 6 feet apart from each other. That was some of the best news I ever heard because I really needed a break from all of that. It's kind of funny how it turned out for me. And so, and then we started to stay 6 feet apart. And then another friend of mine passed away. He passed away because he couldn't stay 6 feet apart from everybody else. He was he was an extrovert. What had happened was when we were in college, he and I both dated this one girl for some time, and we didn't fight with each other. We just kind of took our turn with her, so that was good. He got a little bit more involved with her than I did in terms of body chemistry. Let's put it that way. And I was kind of jealous, but at the same time, we had he and I both had some other common interests. And so one day he invited me over to his apartment, and he was showing me his chemistry experiments. He studied chemistry. I was hoping to major in chemistry, but my parents thought I was too careless to do any of that stuff. And it really shows, right? If you look at all the burns on my hands from even melting something that melts at 270 degrees Celsius, right? You can only imagine if I worked with a few thousand degrees Celsius, right? Or acids or anything like that, right? But he was showing me how to extract gold from salvaged computer chips. And he had all these chemicals, and including hydrochloric acid. And I asked him, where do you buy hydrochloric acid? And he said you could buy it at Home Depot. And the girl that we had dated now worked at Home Depot, and I didn't want to see her. And so instinctively I went, and he said, oh, don't go to Home Depot, go to Lowe's then. And I asked him, well, how much gold do you have right now? And he showed me what might have been like 3 or 4 grams. It was nothing close to an ounce. And my heart sank because I looked at the huge tub of computer chips that he had, and he only had 3 or 4 grams of gold to show for it. You know, I was 18 years old at the time. I wanted to have a 400-ounce gold bar. I still do. I'm still quite a far ways from it. Hopefully one day bismuth will be worth more than gold, and I could just trade some of my bismuth for gold. And obviously gold will be a whole lot less impressive at that point in time, but at least I'll have what I wanted. But my heart sank, but at the same time, it was pretty impressive. I never got around to working with gold. I had other things come up after that, and we actually, when I left his apartment that day, it was the last time I ever saw him in person. We did speak online a few times, but He passed away in December of 2020. And well, the reason he passed away was because he was so good at networking with everybody inside. He was never more than 6 feet away from everybody else. And also, another contributor to why he passed away was because he had a hard time saying no to anybody else. So he would eat all this junk food when he would go to a party, go to an event. He probably smoked or drank from time to time, and that compromised his immune system. And then he was an extrovert, and he never had anybody 6 feet away from him. So he passed away as a result. See, I like to think of it that way, because when I think about that as the reason that he passed away, it doesn't seem so sad anymore, right? And then I had another friend overdose. I hardly knew this friend, actually. I only knew him online, and so he was an ex-boyfriend of another girl that I had dated. See, I don't seem to get into fights with other guys over a girl. I seem to network with them, which is why I think it's stupid that people get all crazy over cheating and all that. It's networking. It's not cheating. He had got injured playing sports, and he overdosed on drugs, and he passed away in early 2022, and it became a big inspiration. See, we had started reopening our offices, and I had started to backslide from my good eating ways. When you're busy, when you're working several part-time jobs and then doing a gig on your own, it's really hard to find time to eat, and so you stuff your face when you get 5 minutes to eat. And when we reopened, I started to backslide into that. And then my friend passed away from heroin, and it became a big inspiration. Oh my God, wake up! And so I decided to quiet quit one of my jobs and focus more on eating well. And to my surprise, I actually had more money in my pocket because I wasn't stuffing it all into my face. And so I worked less, and I actually had more money. That's how stupid it was to try to work more. And then when I was in third grade, one time a classmate of mine stole from me. What had happened was I was in the cafeteria. I dropped my money on the floor. I couldn't find it. It was a quarter. I couldn't find it. And the cafeteria aide was like, "Don't worry about it. Just have lunch." And I went to the table, and I overheard my classmate saying that I found this quarter, ha ha, to whoever dropped it, he couldn't find. He was looking everywhere. I was laughing at him, something like that. I overheard him. He didn't know I was nearby, and I went to his table, and I'm like, "Hey, I dropped the quarter. Did you find it?" I wanted to downplay it. It was no big deal, so that he would give it back. And so he was like, "Yeah, I found it. Can I have it back, please?" He's like, "No, finders keepers," and he refused to give the quarter back. And I was so upset at him, and that became the butt of my joke for many, many years. I thought he should burn in hell for that. And unfortunately, he does burn in hell this past month. I really regret talking so badly about it right now. And so it really goes to show he died of complications from he was recovering from he was in remission from cancer, and then he got COVID, and that was a little bit too much. See, had he not gotten the COVID, it's hard to say how much longer he would have lived, right? But we count that as a COVID death, which is just really awkward, right? What we really should be counting is how many years of life expectancy people are losing due to COVID. If you do it that way, it's probably not nearly so bad, right? See, more people have died from COVID-19 than from World War II, but the number of years lost of life expectancy from World War II definitely dwarfs COVID-19. Right? When you die on the battlefields in World War II, you probably lose 50, 60, 70 years of life expectancy. And when you're dying of cancer and then COVID pushes you over the top, you probably lose a few weeks, a few months at most, right? So it's hard to say. I also had another friend who took his life. He had developed chronic fatigue after getting COVID, and so he unfortunately took his own life. He had a hard time holding down a job. His family was supporting him, and he felt guilty about that. And we had talked a few times. He had a nice family, but he felt guilty about that. And he took his own life. And then I had another friend that I had known since sixth grade. He had a smoking habit when he was in sixth grade. And one day he smoked a cigarette on the school bus, if you could believe it. This was back in the day when nobody really cared. And I asked him for a cigarette, and I started to say, "Give me a cigarette. I want a cigarette so badly," something like that. And he refused to give me a cigarette. At the time, I thought he was just being a selfish dick. And not only did he refuse to give me a cigarette, but he went around the school repeating the song that I had sang and about how badly I wanted a cigarette. And so he refused to give me one. He smoked for a number of years. He quit the smoking, but he developed other habits. And after he had quit smoking, now we were in college. And he came up to me and said, he was sorry for what had happened in sixth grade. And he said he had something he wanted to tell me. He says, at the time, I could have given you a million cigarettes, but I didn't want you to develop my bad habit. And so, see, all those years, I thought he was a selfish dick. He was actually the best friend I ever had. Unfortunately, he also got injured. He's a construction worker. He also got injured and started using heroin, and he died a few weeks ago. And it became a big wake-up call that I need to watch out my own personal. It became a reinforcement for why I wanted to quit masturbating again. I don't think you can necessarily die from masturbating, but what it could do is affect your career, affect your social life, and you could indirectly die, right? And so seeing my friends die of heroin, and also getting hooked onto various things to the point that they don't want to stay 6 feet away from their friends and they die. Seeing that really reinforced my resolve to watch my eating and my masturbating addictions. Anyways, let's read some of the comments. The forks. The forks disappearing was only a symptom. The bigger problem was that my desire to get to whatever I wanted to get to immediately or else, that was what was causing a lot of the drama in my life, right? Nowadays, if forks disappear, it's funny. I laugh with my roommates about it. About the plane, I was on a plane and I got so addicted to writing my computer games that I got really annoyed by the flight attendant asking me to put my computer away that I almost got kicked off of an airplane. See, that's another symptom of it. The writing games addiction probably isn't going to kill me, but the social effects of how it interacts with the rest of my life might, right? That's the big problem that I have. None of the addictions I have could directly cause an overdose. That's the problem, right? I guess food maybe. Certainly not masturbating, or I guess maybe writing the computer games might, because you might stay up 4 nights in a row until you have some kind of problem, right? But for the most part, eating, masturbating, and writing computer games don't immediately cause an overdose death, right? They lead to long-term social problems that might indirectly cause your life to suffer, right? That's the big problem, right? All right, I'm going to close the show for now. So watch out, everybody. People around me are dying, and a lot of it is due to addiction problems. So watch yourself. This is the Peter Dislike Show. Bum, 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 bum. The Peter Dislike Show. Bum, 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 bum.